Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we're going to be talking about my very favorite Clockwork Cyborg with Lady Mechanika #2. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in July of 2011, we can see here on cover A, that's right, cover A, there are actually 6 separate covers for this issue. Mechanika is depicted front and center carrying a double-barreled shotgun and her signature pistol. Really cool, like super ornate little, ring that she's in with what appears to be a Roman numeral 2 at the base. And then you have this, somewhat leaf or ivy pattern behind. But as I stated, there's 6 covers. I have only 2 of them, but I'll show you the second one right now. Here on cover B, we can see Mechanika posed out on the city streets with a rifle in hand in front of what appears to be a steam-powered elephant mech, I'm guessing. It's pretty cool. I like it a lot. Also, I should point out that cover A was penciled by Joe Benitez, whereas cover B was penciled by Peter Steigerwald, where you can actually see the different art styles at play here. I think they're both really good artists, if I'm being quite honest. Now, covers C and D are just black and white parchment style variants of covers A and B, with covers E and F being completely unique. I would really like to find those two. I'm not so concerned about necessarily having the, parchment black and white, pen and ink style covers. They're cool, don't get me wrong. It's just, I don't need a variant of the exact same covers that I already have. I would like to get the 2 covers that I don't have. And, once again, this does kind of play into the whole idea of how many variant covers is too many variant covers. Keep in mind, this is when Lady Mechanika was still being published through Aspen. Aspen being a relatively small company. And, I'm a little more lenient, as I've said in the past, with small publishers doing the large number of variant covers simply because, they got to make money somehow. And if that's how they got to do it, okay, they could do it in worse ways. And, do you want 10 million ads in your book, or do you want, 7 or 8 variant covers? It's kind of a, pick your poison type of scenario. Created, written, and drawn by Joe Benitez. Colors by Peter Steigerwald. Letters by Josh Reed. We see here that issue #2 picks up exactly where issue #1 left off at the Ministry of Health. You may recall, if you've seen my video on issue #1. Honestly, if you haven't watched my video on issues #1 and #0, I suggest you do so. This is a linear story in this miniseries, and most of this isn't going to make sense if you haven't watched those videos. We see here that a man has wandered into the room where Mechanika was defeated by the mysterious figure who stole the body of the half-machine girl that Mechanika was trying to recover. There's steam everywhere because, as you may recall, she was thrown into a pipe and it partially ruptured. He turns off the valve and he's looking around, wondering what happened, trying to figure out what caused all this. And then he sees the silhouette of Mechanika stumbling toward him. He yells out saying, hey, are you the one who did this? Did you cause this? He actually mistakes her for a man initially as she starts to emerge from the steam, and, he's demanding answers. Meanwhile, Mechanika's dazed. She's just been, woken up from being knocked unconscious, and she's really in no mood to deal with this man's line of questioning. However, he makes the mistake of persisting too much and grabs her by the shoulder, and Mechanika takes real offense to this as she quickly spins around and grabs him by the throat. Meanwhile, she's also got an inner monologue going, talking about how one's mind often protects them from memories that they can't emotionally handle or deal with, which is what she believes is happening to her and why she has no memory of her life before having the mechanical limbs, or no memory of what her actual name is, that type of thing, her family. And it's a little bit weird, because we kind of had an understanding of that beforehand, but I guess Joe felt like it was necessary to point out that Mechanika is aware of dealing with this, partial amnesia that she suffers from. But it is a little bit odd having that whole, completely separate monologue going on at the same time that we're also seeing, her dealing with the aftermath of what happened at the end of issue #1. Mechanika warns the man, telling him that she is not a man, correcting his mistake, and also tells him that she would greatly appreciate if he does not put his hands on her. The man is shocked by the revelation that he is dealing with a woman, and my guess is also shocked by the fact that she is far stronger than he would have ever guessed, given that she has grabbed his throat with a mechanical limb, exuding far more strength than he would have assumed she was capable of exuding. He realizes that he may have overstepped his bounds and apologizes. And then when she releases him, he doesn't waste any time in quickly retreating from the situation. After the man has left, Mechanika goes back to rubbing her neck, stating that it is very sore after her being thrown into the steam pipe. She then starts to investigate to see if any clues were left behind by her attacker. She doesn't find anything that he left, but does find a partially broken earring or possibly medallion that was on the girl, and it is a piece of memorabilia that states Cirque dei Romani, which is a gypsy circus that the girl was apparently part of. Mechanika realizes the importance of this clue. However, before she can process that, she is interrupted when someone from behind calls out her name. We are then treated to a 2-page vertical, thanks a lot, Joe, spread, in which we see that it is none other than Commander Winter who has found Mechanika. We learned of her in issue number 1. She is teamed up with Lord Blackpool and tracking down Mechanika for Lord Blackpool. She also has several soldiers with her. She states that Mechanika should, not even think about grabbing her weapon, as all of her men are crack shots and will not hesitate to kill her. However, I find that a little bit hard to believe, considering this guy right here doesn't even have his gun pointed at Mechanika at this moment. She then states that, she knew that she would find Mechanika here in the city when she learned of the body of the dead half-robotic girl or half-mechanical girl, I should say, that was found at the train station, and, was aware that she'd be able to count on Mechanika trying to break into the Ministry of Health and steal the girl's body. But it's also at this point where she alludes to the fact that she and Mechanika actually have a storied past with one another. We then move to the next 2 pages where we see, holy crap, so much dialogue that we're going to have to get into. Hopefully I can do this in one take without making a bunch of mistakes. Commander Winter wastes no time in taking barbs at Lady Mechanika, basically stating that, she's surprised that Mechanika has done so well for herself, but is also happy to see that she's made something of herself. Mechanika returns with a jab of her own, stating that from what she can remember, Commander Winter is lucky that she can see anything, making a point to mention the loss of one of Winter's eyes. Winter takes it in stride, but continues to make her own jabs at Mechanika, insulting her outfit and taste in clothing, and then also bringing up her past, stating, do you remember when I pulled you out of this place, referencing that Mechanika was once imprisoned in the Ministry of Health and was a child at the time, and, being experimented on, constantly living in fear and terror, when it was Commander Winter who took pity on her and pulled her out of this. Mechanika states that, yes, she remembers this, and then makes the point of calling Commander Winter by her first name, which is Catherine. Commander Winter is not happy about this at all, and states that if Mechanika is going to address her, she needs to address her by her title. Mechanika then asks, are you happy working as Blackpool's, little lapdog or whatever? And Commander Winter states that, she's not working for Blackpool, she's working with Blackpool. And the reason she's doing so is because they have one common interest, that being Mechanika herself. Mechanika states that, Commander Winter better be ready to get involved in the fight of her life if she plans on capturing her. And this is where Commander Winter informs Mechanika that the goal is not to capture her, the goal is to kill her. And that Blackpool does not care at all about taking her alive at this point, which is understandable given the amount of damage that Mechanika inflicted on Blackpool in their last meeting. Then Mechanica asks whether or not she can perhaps have a final request and have Commander Winter answer her a simple question before she dies. Winter obliges and states that she's feeling in a hospitable mood. And at this point, we hear Mechanica ask the question, what has happened to her parents and her sister? And this is apparently something that is very enraging to Commander Winter, who loses control and is completely flying off the handle that Mechanica brought up her family. We don't know why this is. We don't know if her family is still alive or not, but it's an incredibly sore subject that sends Commander Winter into a blind rage as she orders her men to fire, and we hear 4 gunshots go off. Unfortunately for Commander Winter, those 4 shots came from Mechanica as she was able to get a headshot on all 4 of the soldiers that were providing backup for Commander Winter. Winter panics and tries to reach for her own pistol when Mechanica once again fires and shoots off both of Commander Winter's fingers, her index and middle finger specifically. Realizing that she is in severe trouble, Winter turns and tries to run. But in doing so, Mechanica uses the final shot in her pistol to shoot Commander Winter in the heel, most certainly severing her Achilles tendon. And realizing that she now has the upper hand, Mechanica takes her time in approaching Commander Winter. She very slowly unloads the spent shell casings from her pistol, which is a cool breech loading pistol, which would have been period correct for the time. This is a type of pistol that kind of fell out of favor in the early 1900s. But in the late 1800s, they were still, popular enough. Also, this is supposed to be taking in the late 1870s, so there's a very good possibility that Mechanica's gun is using black powder instead of smokeless powder. I'm not sure smokeless powder existed in the late 1870s. I'd have to look it up. If I'm wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments. I'm always a little bit hazy about exactly when smokeless powder came onto the scene. As Mechanica approaches Commander Winter, she starts saying that, Winter deserves to be punished for all of her transgressions and betrayals, and for Dallas, who is a character that we have not met, and I don't know who that is exactly just yet. Winter seems to be unamused by everything that Mechanica is saying and tells her to just get on with it and kill her. However, Mechanica states that as much as she'd like to, she wants the commander's punishment to be more fitting, and also says that because Commander Winter did save her from the Ministry of Health, that she owes her a life debt, and this is her repayment for that life debt. She obviously knows that were it not for Commander Winter getting her out of the Ministry of Health, Mechanica would surely be dead. However, Commander Winter seems unamused by this as well, and states that, she should have left Mechanica in her hole to rot. However, Mechanica assures her that the next time they meet, there will not be any mercy on her point, and she will not hesitate to kill Commander Winter. They are then interrupted by another soldier who runs up from behind. Mechanica, without hesitation, pulls her firearm up and points it at the man. But he is unarmed and states that the rest of the troop that was with him have all been killed. This is something that Commander Winter finds shocking and asks him to explain himself, as he goes on to ramble about how all the men were just incinerated in an instant and, that they faced a foe that they couldn't have possibly stood up to. And Commander Winter demands to know who this was that killed all of her men. As Commander Winter continues to berate the soldier, telling him to get himself under control and regain his composure, he finally is able to calm down enough to tell her that he overheard one of the other soldiers state before he died that the man attacking them was named Kane. Commander Winter instantly recognized the name and states that she's rather displeased with it. Mechanica asks who that is, but Commander Winter is in no mood to help Mechanica and simply tells her that she's the detective, she can figure it out. She points her gun at the soldier and states, tell me who that is, but he makes the claim that he has no idea, he's never heard of the name before, he's never seen the man. At this point, Mechanica decides to cut her losses and move on as she bids them adieu and tells Catherine once again that she will definitely be in a different mood the next time they meet, and then also informs her to tell Lord Blackpool that she's not going to forget this encounter with the flunkies that he's hired to come after her, and that she's going to be dealing with him personally. As she walks away, the soldier asks Commander Winter if she needs any assistance, but Commander Winter completely ignores him as she stares down Mechanika as she walks away, most certainly trying to plan how she intends to take revenge. On the next page, we see an advertisement for Broken Pieces, which is a comic I admittedly know absolutely nothing about. I've never seen an issue of Broken Pieces that I can recall in any comic book store, and I really don't know what the plot is about, but if you do, feel free to talk about it in the comments below, because I would like to know a little bit more about it. Later that night, we are teleported to the workshop of Lewis, who is holding a locket in his hand with a picture of presumably his wife and son, who we can deduce are most likely no longer alive, as he sheds a tear and states that he misses them so much, closing the locket and kissing it, and then hanging his head in sorrow before he takes another swig of alcohol. This is where we find out that Lewis isn't really so much just a happy-go-lucky drunk. He's actually just trying to drown his pain with booze as a means of coping, which, by the way, for anyone wondering, that's not the way you deal with depression. It doesn't work at all, and you're never going to make the pain go away with booze. Mechanika then comes out of the darkness stating, "Why am I not surprised?" This startles Lewis as he actually chokes on the liquor and uses that as an excuse to explain the tears in his eyes, stating that, his eyes are watering from choking, which leads us to believe that he's never told Mechanika about his lost family, and that she is completely unaware of, this inner pain that he's dealing with. And we're not sure why he wants to hide that from her, but she is under the impression that we were under up until this moment, that he's just a guy who basically can't control his impulses and drinks too much. He then makes a joke stating, "You're lucky you didn't catch me in my knickers at this late hour," which she said, "Yes, I am." She then begins to ridicule him a little bit, stating, "Is there ever a point where you don't have a drink in your hand?" He tries to play it off, saying, "Not if I can help it. My grandfather always said it's better to have a drink and not need it than to need a drink and not have it." He then asks what Mechanika needs, and, starts to again joke around, asking, "Are you just here for my good looks?" But she gets a little more serious and states that she has a question to ask him, and she needs him to be serious for a moment, which he does oblige. And then she asks him if he's ever heard the name Kane when he worked for Blackpool Industries. This makes his eyes go wide, as we see in this close-up, and he states that he knows the name very well and wonders exactly what Mechanika has gotten herself into. She states if it was someone he knew, and he rebuttals, saying that Kane didn't work there anymore by the time he was hired, but the stories were definitely on the tongues of everyone who worked there, and that Kane was a master engineer and created machinery and different types of devices that the rest of the people working there couldn't have imagined in their wildest dreams, which is why Kane got a certain nickname from all of his fellow employees. We then get a 2-page ad for Haunted City, which, again, is a comic I admittedly have never read. I do recall seeing issues of this at times when I was in comic book stores, but it wasn't anything I ever felt really drawn to at the time. Not that I wouldn't pick up an issue and maybe peruse through it, but it wasn't something that I was looking to buy. And, when it comes to comic book collecting, you're always in that sweet spot of like, what do I have enough money to buy versus what do I actually want to buy, which is usually 2 to 3 times more than what you have the money to buy. But if you know anything about Haunted City and would like to talk about it in the comments below, feel free to do so, because I'd like to know more about it. We're then teleported to a laboratory where we see Kane carrying the body of the dead girl that he took from Mechanika, as Lewis continues to talk over and explain to Mechanika who Kane was, stating that, he worked for Blackpool, but wasn't really anyone or someone that any of the other employees, had dealings with, and He had his own private laboratory in the bowels of Blackpool Industries, and that the machines that he was creating were incredible, to the point where Mechanica actually says, you seem to be speaking about him with reverence. And Lewis states that's because the man's ingenuity was incomprehensible to most. He would devise and create machines that, were beyond imagination, and things that the rest of the people working there thought were impossible, as we see Kane starting to do something with the young girl's body as he lays her flat on a table and inserts some sort of device into her nostrils. And he then finally realizes that Mechanica might believe that Kane is the one responsible for creating her mechanical limbs and that of the girl. Mechanica said she's not actually sure, but Lewis tells her that Kane is someone that she really should not be fooling around with, and, brings up a story of a terrible accident that happened at one of Blackpool's facilities up north. And she says she remembers there was a huge explosion and hundreds of men were maimed and killed, and that it was a terrible industrial accident. And Lewis then tells her that it was no accident, it was Kane who did that, and that there's no possibility that Kane and Blackpool are working together. And, whatever's going on right now is something that she really should not be in the middle of. But Mechanica states that she can't just stop here. She needs to know more about her past. She also wants to find the body of the girl, and that she's not going to give up just because things are getting difficult. She then asks Lewis if his flying machine is in good order, and he says that it is and that he's ready to go. To which Mechanica replies, it's dark outside and you're completely pissed drunk right now, so maybe I'm not going to get into a flying machine that you're operating. He states that that's fair enough and concedes to them getting a start in the morning. The next morning, we see Mechanica and Lewis flying in what he calls the Lewis Flyer. Mechanica asks if he's positive that this machine is safe. Lewis assures her that it is, and that she'll be seeing tons of these throughout the skies after Mechanicon when he presents this to the world. She then looks over the side and notices what she was trying to find, and has Lewis land on the cliff that we saw in the last issue that the now deceased girl jumped off of when she landed on top of the train that took her into Mechanica City. We then get Mechanica's explanation of how she deduced this was the right spot, stating that there were reports from people in the train of a huge thud hitting around this area, which would have most certainly been the girl. Lewis then realizes that there's a lot of footprints around and some blood, putting together that there was signs of a struggle. And Mechanica actually gets a little bit dismissive of it, stating, aren't you so good at pointing out the obvious? Lewis takes a little bit of offense and states, don't get cheeky with me, as he follows Mechanica as she goes into the woods and finds a large group of flowers that are called Dame's Violets, which she said the girl had a faint aroma of on her, so she knows this is the right spot. What she's having trouble putting together is the fact that the tracks and the trail of the girl and the men chasing her all end right here in this flower bed, and Lewis then states, well, then how did they get here? Mechanica states that they had to have somehow dropped from an airship of some type, and they look up and see that there are dozens of airships above their heads, which are most likely all coming into the city for Mechanicon. And Lewis states that, we're not going to be able to figure out exactly which one of these they dropped out of. And Mechanica agrees and states that at this point they need to probably investigate the Cirque du Romani and find out if there's anyone at the circus who knows of the girl or can give them any information. Lewis quickly makes a point to bow out of this part of the investigation, as he states he has to get ready for Mechanicon, and apparently he's also afraid of clowns. Mechanica, laughs at him, but he says, hey, they're creepy, back off, I don't want any part of them. We are then teleported to Blackpool Manor, where we are introduced to some sort of mechanical automaton, which is either a robot or perhaps a human brain encapsulated inside of this robot. It's not really explained. The robot is walking into Lord Blackpool's study. This, of course, is in his home inside of Mechanica City, as we find out that Blackpool has just run a man through with a cane blade by the name of Powell. Powell apparently was in charge of procuring the girl's body, and now that the body has gone missing and Blackpool is aware of the fact that it was Kane that took her, he's really in a bad mood. He states that there's no way that Kane should have been able to figure out where the girl's body was stashed. And he's also wondering why Kane is showing up at this moment when they've not heard of him or heard from him in an incredibly long time. Powell says that, he did nothing wrong. He doesn't know how Kane was able to figure any of this out. But Blackpool is rather dismissive of him and states that the only way Kane could have figured out anything is if Powell made a mistake, and, states that he doesn't have time to deal with this as he's got to get ready for Mechanicon because most of their, most important clients are going to be attending and are going to be expecting to see the latest wares that Blackpool Industries has to offer. Powell is then starting to really struggle to speak as he is obviously in a large degree of pain and is bleeding profusely from his stab wound as he begs for Blackpool to help him. Blackpool, again, just kind of dismisses him, stating, I don't have time for this, and then orders the automaton to help Powell. And the automaton responds, yes, of course, but would you like some port before so? And Blackpool's like, yes, that sounds lovely. I love that, the butler is still a consummate butler. And it's like, well, before I clean up this near dead man off your floor, why don't I offer you this glass of wine so that you can enjoy your view and afternoon? Later on that night at the Cirque de Romani, we see that Lady Mechanika has shown up stating that, or in her inner monologue, I should say, thinking that, people fear often what they don't understand or they feel to be different than themselves, which is why people would be afraid of her if they knew that she was half mechanical. But then also states that, this is kind of the plight that is of the Romani, as, they're hated by all that exist in Europe, as they've been driven from every land and they have no home to call their own, and they just constantly wander and they exist outside of society, when she is suddenly interrupted by a small French-speaking dwarf clown who greets her in French, I might add, not a, English speech bubble that, has a little thing around it that says in or translated from French. No, Joe Benitez took the time to actually, have them write this in actual French. We then see an advertisement for Fathom Volume 4, Number 1, and I believe that this was released after Michael Turner's death, as Michael Turner is not credited in working on this book at all. For those of you who don't know, Michael Turner died rather young from cancer. He was the founder of Aspen Comics and the creator of Fathom. His work was really good, actually, and it's really a shame that he died so tragically at such a young age. Back in the story, we see the clown asking Mechanika if she can speak French, and she responds that she can, but only a little bit. So he asks if she would prefer to speak in English. She replies yes. And so he reintroduces himself as Bippo, and then also introduces the monkey named Napoleon, and then also his brother, who he says needs to introduce himself to Mechanika. However, his brother doesn't seem to be too interested in conversation as he just grumpily walks by. So Bippo states that his brother is ill-mannered and decides to kick him in the butt with a swift kick that knocks him completely off of his feet so hard that he accidentally farts on the impact. And then, Bippo and Mechanika get a little bit of laugh, and Bippo states, oh, apparently his name is actually Bert. This, however, does not sit well with his brother, whose name is Pibbo, as he states that he's going to kill Bippo. Bippo has a look of terror on his face as he starts to run, and his brother starts chasing him with his club. And Bippo is crying for Mechanika to help him as his brother is going to kill him, and it turns into a complete mess of a melee, all around Mechanika's feet. As the chaos continues, the monkey jumps onto Mechanika's shoulder as the clowns run through her legs. They continue to run around her feet as she tries to pull the monkey off of her back. Meanwhile, the clown's yelling as Bippo tries to plead with Mechanika to save him. He doesn't want to die. We then see the two of them start to run off as the monkey jumps off of Mechanika's back, but also takes her hat along with him. She yells at the monkey stating, "Hey, give that back." She then reaches up and finds that the clowns have put one of their hats on her head, which she finds unamusing. However, she is then distracted when she hears a growling sound and turns around to see a large panther with its teeth showing. She instinctively grabs her revolver and points it at the cat when it is then suddenly knocked out of her hand by a throwing knife and then as it lands, a subsequent throwing knife sticks right through the trigger guard, pinning her pistol to the ground as she looks up and sees a man clutching a few more knives and realizes that perhaps the ensuing melee, or the previous melee between the two clown brothers, wasn't all that it appeared to be, and they may have been partaking in a very clever ruse. On the final page of the story, we see the two clown brothers standing alongside a large muscular man covered in knives. One of them, we see Bippo, is sitting on the back of the panther, and the monkey, Napoleon, is on top of the man's shoulder, and that Pibbo is standing behind him, stating that, he need not worry about her shooting as he stole all of the bullets out of her gun, which, by the way, there's no way he did that. As I stated before, Mechanika has a breech-loading pistol, which means that he would have had to take the pistol out of its holster, open it, pull all 6 rounds out of it, close it, and then put it back in the holster. There's no way he was able to do that in that time frame without her noticing. And even if he was able to grab her gun, why wouldn't you just take the gun from her? There's no reason to take it, unload it, and then give it back. You would just keep the firearm. We find out that the man wielding all of the knives is named Gaetano, and that he is apparently the one in charge of the circus. He's not too happy about an outsider coming into his circus poking around and wants to know exactly what Mechanika's motives are and why she's here, as we see that this is to be continued in issue number 3. And on the next page, we get an advertisement for Lady Mechanika issue number 3. This, of course, one of the covers. This will have multiple covers as well, 2 of which are depicted right here. I'm sure there will be more than 2. I don't remember how many of these different covers I have. Probably at least 2, maybe 3. We'll find out the next time I do a video on Lady Mechanika, which will come out in the future at some point. On the final page of the book, we see an advertisement for Soulfire number 2. Soulfire, like the other books that have been advertised in this issue, I've never read. I know I've seen Soulfire before, and maybe if I could potentially find a decent run of it, I might buy a collection of them just to, read through and potentially do some videos on. But again, if you've read Soulfire and have any information you'd like to share about it, feel free to do so in the comments, because I'd like to know more about it. And on the reverse inside cover, we get an advertisement for the AspenStore.com, where you could actually buy prints of a lot of the different covers of a lot of their different comics. I didn't pay attention to this at the time when I originally bought this book, as it was originally coming out. And I kind of wish I had, because some of these prints are pretty cool, and I really like the artwork of Joe Benitez, so I kind of regret not being able to jump on this at the time and buy some prints of these different works of his. It's kind of a regret of mine. And that was Lady Mechanika number 2. Overall, I really did enjoy this issue, despite the fact that, it was a very heavy issue in terms of how much story was brought forth. As I stated, tons of dialogue, tons of new information about characters, but at no point did it ever feel confusing when you're reading it. I really, that's one of the things that a lot of indie books suffer from. It was one of the big criticisms I had of the Wildcats miniseries, where, I felt like there was too much story being all thrown at you at one time, and it was confusing and hard to follow, and characters would just show up and you had no idea who they were. Whereas this book, for as much new story elements as it's introducing, I feel like it's doing it in a way that makes sense. We learned a lot more about Commander Winter and Lewis in this issue. Lewis in particular, I like how, Joe gave that character a lot more depth than just being this, drunken buddy of Mechanika who's trying to help him or trying to help her out in her quest. There's more going on with him than we thought. And also alluding to the fact that there's way more story between Mechanika and Commander Winter than we previously realized. And then, it does seem a little weird to take her out of the city at this point and, get her into the circus, creating more characters there, and also introducing the character of Kane, which means that, up until this point, we had kind of thought that Mechanika's main adversary was going to be Blackpool, but it turns out Kane might be someone that she's got to deal with as well. Again, tons of information, tons of new story that's all being brought in a single issue, but it actually works really well and does a great job of, world building that I don't really feel like the story needed necessarily that much world building all in one issue, but it got it. And in my opinion, it accomplished it overall pretty well. But of course, these are just my opinions. You might have thought that there was way too much story that was brought in this issue, or just thought it was done poorly. But if that's your opinion, it's okay, because everyone's entitled to their own opinions. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.